A nonprofit organization will hold a fundraiser for programs to combat homelessness. To tell us about the event and the programs is the president and executive director of HomeStart, Matt Pritchard. Thank you very much for being with us, Matt.
Thank you, Chris. It's a delight.
Now, what's unusual here, you have a program that concentrates on housing, but a lot of your foundation for this is your experience in a shelter. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I moved to Boston in the late 90s exclusively to work with people experiencing homelessness. And I felt like if I was, in any convincing way, lead well people experiencing homelessness, I needed to better understand it. And so I accepted a role on the condition that I'd be allowed to live in the bunks of a homeless shelter for a year, which I did.
What did you learn?
I learned quite a bit. In fact, that year I think of as the year that I got my PhD in life, and yet I think that at the core is that I found myself over and over again wanting to be more like my bunkmates who were there because of crises, and it's the the theme of getting knocked down and getting back up is one that I wanted more of myself, and so that's really been the compelling reason to spend my professional life advocating for and supporting people who are in the margins of society.
Well, people with less familiarity with the problem than you might have thought at one time, at least, that something like a shelter was a way of solving a problem, and after the problem was solved, you could have housing. But you look at housing as the way of solving the problem.
That's right. So the traditional approach to addressing homelessness was to shelter, just as you've said, providing emergency shelter for people who ended up homeless. And about 20 years ago or so, HUD elected to run a pilot in the city of Boston to find out if we provided housing search and stabilization services for the people who had the most acute needs in the shelter system, where the social outcomes better and quite frankly the financial investment was more efficient in doing that. And so that's how HomeStart began 20 years ago.
Tell me about the range of people that you work with.
So last year we housed 660 individuals who were living on the streets and in shelter. So that was in calendar year 2014. And we prevented over 400 individuals living at or below the poverty level from being evicted for a non-payment of rent. And so last year we served just about 1,000 and maybe 1,200 people with those variety of services, and providing stabilization services for people who have been on the streets for the longest amount of time so that they could retain and maintain the housing that we've provided for them.
It sounds as if you're working with a very vulnerable population. These are not just economically struggling individuals or families.
Yeah, so I would say about half of the people staying in shelter this evening in the city of Boston work full-time, minimum wage, and simply don't have affordable housing. Some crisis has hit, they've lost their housing. And so our housing search services are sort of divided into two groups of people. There are those groups who could be rapidly rehoused so they don't become chronically homeless. And then the other set of our services are for people who have been chronically homeless. They've had episodes of homelessness for over a year.
Talk about the services that you do carry out to allow people to hang in there, because you can't just drop someone into an apartment and close the door and walk away.
That's right. What we found is that if a person's been living on the street for a long period of time, it's typically because they have some dual diagnosis issues, some mental health issues, for instance, and so the problem with being on the streets is that it's very difficult to manage your medication protocol, for instance. And so we found occasionally people who present to have significant mental health issues, once they're housed, it stabilizes after they've gotten their mental and physical health issues addressed. But frequently the issues are acute enough that they require sort of long-term support. So this is our advocates going in to provide stabilization services as many times as necessary in a week. I mean, it's individualized approach, and the objective is to figure out exactly what a person needs in order to maintain the housing.
Well, this all started as a kind of experiment. Any studies or anything like that out there that shows how well this has been working?
So again, you could answer that question from the social perspective or from the economic perspective. And the Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance participated in a program with Boston Healthcare for the Homeless a few years ago and followed a group of people who they had data around their hospital utilization, et cetera, shelter expenses. And they found that when a person is housed, not only is the savings, close to half of what it had been when they were on the streets with high medical utilization, but the social outcomes in terms of their long-term stability was significantly greater.
Right. You've got a fundraiser coming up, and this is an unusual event because, like your own history here, you want people to get a taste of what they're contending with.
Sure, and a taste is maybe a stretch, but it's a glimpse at least. The event is iCycle, and it happens the last Thursday of every February. It's an outdoor stationary bike marathon, and it happens at one international place. We have a number of companies sign on as sort of a team building and a philanthropic activity. Each rider raises funds for HomeStart services, and they ride from 6 a.m. until about 5 or 6 p.m. And it's all spinning classes, hours. Pat the Patriot will be there. I think Blades the Bruin will be there, and Wally the Green Monster. It's fun. We have a lot of fun with it. But last year, most of our riders' water bottles froze over the course of the hour that they were sitting on the stationary bike.
It was an especially rough winter, though.
Indeed. So, we would invite anyone who's interested in supporting HomeStart to go to iCycleBoston.com or to our website, homestart.org, and to the events tab and support any one of our riders.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Matt
My
Pritchard,
pleasure. Thank you.
HomeStart.